You're listening to the UKC Hunting Ops Podcast, celebrating hunting dog heritage, competition, and community. United Kennel Club has been the hunting dog sports home for coonhounds, beagles, retrievers, pointers, cur, feist, and more for over 125 years.
Welcome back to the UKC Hunting Ops Podcast. This is Trevor Wade. I'm the Coonhound Program Manager at UKC, and I'm joined today by Alan Gingrich, the Director of Hunting Ops. What's going on, Alan?
I'm doing well. Welcome back. You've been out for a little while.
Yeah, went down to
for a week at least.
Yeah, went down to Tennessee for Thanksgiving week. That was pretty nice.
Yeah,
get down there, and then I come back into a blizzard.
Yeah, Sunday it snowed here on us, but yeah, I know you've been out of the podcast booth for a couple of weeks now.
Yeah, last one we did, we talked about next year's events and that sort of thing, and then
yeah.
You and Dom did one, and then you and Eric did one about the beagles.
Retrievers and coonhounds, kind of talked about the differences there, big differences there, and then we had, yeah, you're right, had Eric Ant here talked about beagles in the last episode. So,
yeah. Well,
what do you got on the docket today?
Well, we got a bunch of good coonhound stuff today.
Okay.
We've been trying to make a concentrated effort on the podcast to give all the segments plenty of limelight. I think we've been doing that the past couple months. We've had not as many coonhound episodes, a few more beagle episodes and retriever episodes and that sort of thing. And hopefully people like that. We have multiple segments here. It's a versatile company, so a lot of different dog sports that are happening here.
Yeah, I'd like to get a couple squirrel episodes in as well when we get the chance. You need to find somebody to talk about squirrel dogs. Maybe, I don't know, might have to just you and I talk about squirrel dogs here.
Yeah, I can act like I know something. Yeah, no, but today we're going to talk about a few things that have popped up for 2024, and we're actually going to talk about rules later in the episode. It's been a while since we talked about rules.
Yeah, good.
We're going to start out by talking about the 10 Mile 300, the first Coonhound UKC Pro Slam.
Hey, we talked about the Pro Slam for beagles last week, or in the last episode Eric and I did. So yeah, when you were gone, but yeah. Let's talk about these winners. You were there for it, actually.
I was there. I got to go down. It's obviously right there by my hometown, 10 Mile. So I went down Saturday evening, got there about 45 minutes before the deadline, and it was just a fun hunt to be at.
Yeah.
It always is there. It's more than just the hunters being there. There's always the old timers that are there.
Hey, isn't it always fun to go back to your home club,
it
too?
Is. Yeah.
There's something about that is always so good. I don't get to go as much as I could and should, to my old club. But anytime I've went there, it's just, I don't know, it's means a lot to you.
Absolutely.
Think about a lot of history there.
Yeah, absolutely. I got to sit around. I stayed for the whole duration of the hunt. So I stayed at the club for the early round and got to look around at all the pictures of everybody that had been there. And it's just neat looking at that stuff.
Yeah. November 18th, a couple of Saturdays ago. Yeah,
that's right. So I got there about 45 minutes, and there was already a good crowd there. They have a little TV in there. They were playing some of the football games that were going on. And Alan Roberts, you may not know by looking at him, but he's a heck of a cook. He had a whole big spread there, ham dinner with mashed potatoes and corn and green beans.
Him, really?
But I don't know if he's a good cook or not. Who knows? I'm not sure if he takes credit for the cooking or not, but. Yeah, but they had the whole spread there, and it was free for everybody, even whether you were hunting or not. They had it for everybody, and maybe that's why there were so many people there. But it was a good deal for everybody. They had desserts and everything, and it was just a beautiful day. Weather was good down there. I think it was mid-60s on a few early days that week, but it was pretty dry.
Yeah,
conditions have been dry down there. They're way behind as far as rain goes for the year, and that kind of played into it later in the night. But the early round was a good hunt. Everybody treated coons. Everybody had a cast. Obviously, everybody had a cast winner in the full elimination format, and it was good stuff.
Yeah.
I want to give credit to Alan Roberts real quick. Obviously, he's the head honcho of the club down there. Kind of made this thing go.
Yeah. Hey, I don't think you have it in your notes here, but Boots Welch, you did a little, give him a little certificate or something too, didn't you?
That's right. You put together a little certificate for his years of dedication. For
so he was there and everything. I hadn't asked you about that, but
well, he actually wasn't there.
Oh, he wasn't.
He was down and out on his luck, but they did have his nephew come.
Okay.
Who is actually now Boots has been an officer of Birchwood Coon Club down in Southeast Tennessee for over 50 years. They said, and just recently took a back seat, and this is actually a family member of Boots who has stepped in and is now an officer of the Birchwood Coon Club, and he accepted it on his part, and they sent me a picture the next day of him giving it to him, and he's very appreciative of that honor. So.
Well, that's good. Yeah, the club kind of honored him with just for his years of service to the club and the surrounding clubs and everything else. So, yeah, Boots Welch. Congratulations, man. Well deserved, too.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to give a shout out to Troy Torbett real quick. He was the kind of the head hunt director there. I've known Troy for a while. He's always around to lend a helping hand. You have to have people like that at the clubs.
Yep.
And then Walter Hickman. He had a couple dogs in the hunt, obviously, but he also he has a lot of prime hunting territory down there. Has a lot of farmland down there to hunt, and he guided a bulk of the cast, including the final cast as well. 2 early and obviously the final cast too. So 3 out of the 5 casts went to his spot. So thanks to Walter for that.
Good deal.
We'll go through the cast here real quick, just to give some people some recognition. Cast 1, Night Champion World War Z, Tree and Walker male, 4-year-old, owned by Jonathan Moses and Joshua Sparks. Madisonville, Tennessee, won that cast. John Moses was handling with 375 plus.
That's a good score.
Yeah. Cast 2 winner, Grand Night Champion 2, Buck Creek Johnny B. Bad. It's a 4-year-old Tree and Walker male owned by Walter Hickman and Josh Bidwell of Georgetown, Tennessee. Handled by Josh, had 200 plus. Cast 3 winner, Autumn Oaks winner from this year, National Grand Night Champion After Dark Ferris, 5-year-old Tree and Walker male owned by Lee Varner of Andersonville, Tennessee. Lee handled and had 150 plus with Ferris. And a Cast 4 winner, Kyle Oaks, kind of a younger guy. He came and judged for us at the World Finals this year.
Yeah.
You could get to know Kyle a little bit, and he's well respected in this area, Southeast Tennessee. And he was able to sneak into the Final 4 with a 375 plus cast win.
Yeah.
CNO, Night Champion CNO's limb hanging blue rip. Johnny Cooper, Crawford, Tennessee owns that dog. So that set the scene for our final cast there. All came back with plus points there, as I said, and kind of shifted. I said it's been 60s during the day, but when night came on, it got real cold. Some rain was rolling in the next day or two, and kind of a cold front, it seemed like, and got real windy, but we went to a nice place. It was a nice hardwood section, a lot of acorns around there.
You mentioned it being dry. I know the Beagle guys over in West Virginia for their slam were complaining about that too. They hadn't had rain in forever, but then it rained there on Friday, I think.
Perfect.
So it kind of moistened things up a little bit, but
when it's that dry, it just soaks it right in, doesn't it?
But
so all dogs on the final cast. It was a tough final cast. The wind was whipping. They all drew some minus, but we ended up giving out the money. You know how it is at these pro slams. Just got to do what you got. And in fourth place was Josh Bidwell hunting Buck Creek Johnny B. Bad. Johnny B. Bad got a $500 check. He's out of Grand Night Champion Johnny B. Good and Cole Meyer's cousin's doll baby. In third place, our $600 winner was the National Grand Night Champion After Dark Ferris and Lee Varner. They got the $600 check. And Ferris, we talked about him a little bit on here. Grand Night Champion Bowers After Dark Mikey and Hickman's Honeybee is his pedigree there. Second place and our $800 winner was Kyle Oaks handling Blue Rip, the blue tick. He is out of, Racket Ridge Crash and Williams Red Stick Ann. So good blue tick cross there. And our overall winner and got $2,000 check was World War Z, owned and handled by Jonathan Moses. Josh Sparks is also a co-owner on the dog. Z's out of Wipeout 3 Zone and Pale Moon's Insane Chigger.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well-bred dog.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so World War Z, that's kind of a different name, but kind of a catchy name. Night Champion still, I see.
Well, that's the kind of the funny thought. On the way after the hunt, Z was way out of pocket. Jonathan had to drive around and get him. And I was riding with Alan Robertson. He kind of called Jonathan to make sure he was all right, and he had gotten the dog and everything. And he said, well, in addition to his $2,000 check, he got the 2 wins. And with those 2 wins, the dog finished a Grand Night Champion and qualified for the Tournament of Champions all here in one night. So,
yeah, a lot going on there.
Yeah, there's more to it than just that check.
Yeah, so this was a 16-dog hunt, $300 entry fee, and the first UKC first official Coonhound Pro Slam.
So it was a successful night there in Southeast Tennessee, and we thanks the club for putting it on, and thanks for everybody for entering.
Yeah. Congratulations to these handlers too, Josh Bidwell, Lee Varner, Kyle Oaks, and Jonathan Moses, the overall winner there. Now, Jonathan Moses, being from Tennessee, got to ask you, I know there's some other Moses Plot guys there. Is he related to them or no?
No.
Different.
No, and he won't appreciate you saying that, Alan. No, I'm just kidding.
Hey, when you don't know, you don't know.
No,
sometimes you ask dumb questions.
No, I'm just kidding. They're all good guys, but don't know of any similar family there between the two. But known Jonathan for a long time. He's had a lot of success with dogs down that area. And him and Z have been on a roll. They primarily hunt other registries. They do good in PKC and Pro Sport as well. And he's done a lot of good this year. He's qualified for TFC, and he's looking forward to that. So
there you go.
Congratulations
to all of them.
Yeah, we should briefly mention the Bordertown Battle, Seneca, Missouri. We're going to try to do a 27 dog, $1,250 hunt there, and unfortunately just didn't fill.
Man, I was so excited for that one. That one's partially our fault for not following through a little bit better maybe with the date stuff, but I just did not realize. I know we both looked at different dates, and it just totally, there's some other events going on, a big event in Illinois on that same weekend, a big money hunt, and just not a good weekend for it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I think it would have. Guys were excited about this and everything about this one, and man, it's just a wrong weekend. Yeah. I feel like.
Yeah, dang it. I know we looked at some scheduling and may have just overlooked it, or maybe didn't take into consideration the overlap in the hunters there. But also probably didn't help that the weekend that it opened, or the week that it opened, with the weekend prior, this same area, Quapaw, had a high entry fee, and maybe people, 2 big entries in a row,
much higher than this.
Could have.
Yeah. This one was 12. This one was high too, 1250. But
7,500.
I still think hopefully these guys won't be discouraged by that. We're not going to be, but I think it's just a bad weekend and to schedule it for that. But I really feel these 27 dog ones, 3 dog casts like that, I think they're going to take off.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we talked. Hey, obviously got to take some personal responsibility. It should have done a little bit more vetting on our part, and dang, now that we know, now we learned from it, and we're not gonna get discouraged by it. We're gonna keep on putting them in quality areas and giving people a chance to enter them up.
Yep, and I think we had the right club for it too for that first one. Just a wrong date. Yeah.
So kind of moving on here, last Coonhound episode, we talked about 2024 year, and we were able to talk about 6 of the zone locations: Reading, Michigan; Ashtabula, Ohio; Sedalia, Missouri; Rogersville, Tennessee; Coffeyville, Mississippi; and Paris, Texas. Just right there, same day that it aired out for everybody, got confirmation from Norway, South Carolina, Mendel Miller and those guys down there, that they were going to be able to host the zone for us. We were working with them down there. Kind of a new area. They haven't hosted the zones down there before, so excited to get it down there in Norway. That's southeast South Carolina, somewhere near Orangeburg.
It is, yeah, and we're familiar with it. It's right close to Orangeburg there, so we go there every year.
Yep.
So we're familiar with the area. And matter of fact, a lot of times they take the final cast at Orangeburg. They take it up there close to Norway.
Yeah. So at this point, we got 7 of them locked in, and we're actually going to probably have 8 this year and next year. 2024 and 2025. Still waiting on confirmation from one club. I've been ringing their phone off the hook the past couple of days trying to get it locked in.
Come on, Jim.
we hope to get it in there, but we'll get that out. We'll get that information out as soon as possible, and it'll be before any qualifiers take place.
So for sure.
And the last one, last time I talked about Youth Nationals a little bit. We were working towards getting a location for Youth Nationals, and finally got it locked in. Mid-American Coonhounders Association in Troy, Iowa, up in the Northwest. They're going to host it for us this year.
Yeah. You think Iowa, okay, that's, like you said, Northwest, but really Troy is in the southeast corner of Iowa. Right. So it's right in the corner of Illinois, Missouri, and Iowa right there. And it's a great place. Yeah. They have had a lot of events there. They've had the regions there, a lot of qualifiers, a lot of zones, and a lot of events in that part of the country. A lot of hunters right there. It'll be a good spot for it.
Yeah. Had a good blue tick days there, right?
Yep. And they've had a lot of big hunts.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually just got off the phone with Tyler Batterson before he came down, just trying to iron out some last minute details.
Yeah, Tyler's a young guy there that's very involved in the club and really spearheading a lot of what's going on out there. And it's good to see those young guys like Tyler taking the bull by the horn, so to speak, and working some of these events. Like a lot of ambitions here, and he has his buddies helping, and that's always a good thing. And you interviewed Tyler not too long ago. You had him on a podcast, didn't you?
Yeah, it was back when I went to Blue Tick Days in the spring. Okay. I went back and this looked like it was episode 54 of this podcast.
Yeah.
And one good thing that he talked about was kind of the youth series that they do there in southern Iowa and how all the clubs work together. And hey, that kind of had a lot to do with this. We had conversations after that about them wanting to put their name in the hat to host this event one year. And why wait around? They've right now they have all the support.
Yeah.
There's a lot of young folks in that area that deserve a shot. And some people might be they might look at this and say, man, that's a long drive. But for these kids, they're driving to youth nationals a long way as well. So this time they get a little shorter drive, and you may have to drive this year.
Yeah.
Next year already have conversations with some different clubs to move it back to a central part of the area, but we move youth nationals around some. It's one that we like to move around.
This is going to be great, though, for a lot of kids, like you mentioned, that oftentimes do have a little bit of a drive. Missouri kids, Oklahoma kids, not very far for them at all. You know, there's a lot of kids in Iowa as well, so it'll be a good place for it.
Yeah, absolutely it will.
They'll have a good turnout.
Yeah, it'll be July 19th and 20th. Probably still be a little bit warm, but it could be worse. You know, it won't be quite as warm up there as it is some places down south. So
they have good hunting there. It'll be a good spot for it.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, so I just got the phone with him. He's thinking that they have 2 locations kind of pegged out that they're still working on. One either Troy or Eldon.
Okay.
They're about 15 miles apart, so it doesn't make a big difference either way. But don't have an exact location pinned down just at this time. But they're working to see what makes the most sense for the club and for us for what we need.
Yeah, over the years, I know there's been like we mentioned, numerous hunts in that area, and there have been different facilities where they've had them, and all good ones. Keosauqua was one of them right close by there. They had a nice grounds there. Yeah. I've been there before, but
he mentioned the Eldon fairgrounds. They used to have the Blue Tick reunion there every year.
Yeah.
So that may be a location, or there's a spot right there in Troy that's a little bit closer to the Missouri line, so guys in northern Missouri can judge and guide for them with a little bit of a better drive. So we'll see what pans out, but you won't be left in the dark. We'll let everybody know, and we'll have it on our website.
And that Youth Nationals happens before school starts, so in July there, but like third week in July, something like that.
Yeah, mark it on your calendars now, July 19th and 20th next year. Alan, I know we both have new Dogtra Pathfinder 2s. How are you liking yours so far?
I'm liking it. I've even had the opportunity now to use mine where I didn't have service, where I download the map of that area where I didn't have the service, and it works flawlessly. Love it.
I agree. I really like my Dogtra Pathfinder 2 as well. I've used it quite a bit the past few months. I really like the crystal clear maps. I like that it doesn't lose service very much, and I don't have many bad things to say about it at all. Dogtra Pathfinder 2, the official GPS collar partner of UKC. Well, with that being said, it's been a while since we talked about some rule stuff, so we're going to talk about some different rule scenarios today. And I don't know, just was in thinking about possums, I guess, because today's rule segment is all about off game.
Oh boy. So that's putting me on the spot, probably.
Well, there's going to be we're going to go through the rules a little bit, step by step, and maybe even talk about some different scenarios for questions that we get from time to time. Actually, what brought it on, we had a pretty good question here in the past couple of days that we've been discussing a lot, and I don't know, when that happens, one thing that I always get nervous about is there's always probably a precedence that's been said in a past advisor column where we've given out an answer, and I don't ever want to go against any of those answers. Oftentimes me and you have talked about it, or it's scenarios that we talk about all the time, and you get the same questions over and over again, but sometimes you get a question that kind of piques your interest, and you go to digging in those advisors, and you can find a lot of information and scenarios that you just don't think about very often.
Yeah, we have that to go back to, and we can find a lot of that stuff pretty easily, and readily if we need to. But that's one thing I've always tried to do since I've been here is, be conscious of those things where precedence has been set. Might not always agree 100% with it, but you try to stick with that, and
Yeah, so perfect. I think the first place to start an off game is just to talk about the rules that we have and maybe read those out for people to see. Grab your 2023 rule books and follow along with us. Maybe get a highlighter or a Sharpie or something.
I was going to grab one. I laid it out on my desk before we came down here because you mentioned we were going to talk about rules, and I grabbed the rule book and I didn't even bring it down here. So
it's a good thing you got them memorized.
Yeah. Since you came around, and I used to be able to quote about any rule, in the rule book, but I know what Todd feels like after you don't do it for a little while. You need to look things up a little bit.
Yeah. Well, this will be a good refresher course.
Doesn't come as easily anymore, I guess.
Sure, absolutely. Anytime you.
It's still fairly easy, but it's just not as far as and the other thing, the rule numbers changed and things like that. That's the hardest thing, probably.
Yeah, sometimes looking at those old advisor columns, that's kind of the hardest part, is kind of when the rule numbers are in there, trying to remember or pinpointing what rule he's referencing and things like that if you don't also mention it in there. So
Yep.
But this is coming from the newest rule book, the 2023 version, which we'll be using, and we're just going to read some off-game rules here. The first one's going to be Rule 6F, and it's under the scratching section, dog scratching section. It reads, dogs will be scratched in champion division casts for running, treeing, or molesting off-game. And in parentheses here it says off-game must be seen during hunting time, including any timeout periods prior to the expiration of hunt time, parentheses exception 5B. It says in the event the off game is a squirrel seen in a tree, and 2, the tree is an obvious den tree, refer to Rule 5D, birds are not considered off game. So don't be too overwhelmed by that. We're actually going to break that kind of down sentence by sentence and kind of tell you what we mean by that and some interpretations on that. But real quick before we do that, let's talk about obviously this rule here is for champions. You'll be scratched from a hunt for off game. If you're in a champion division, we have registered casts and we have champion casts. That's in a normal event. In some events, all dogs draw out together. Slams, youth events, qualifying events. If you go to tournament champion finals or anything like that, those are all held with all dogs drawn together under champion rules.
Yep, that's right. That's what I was going to mention.
But in the registered hunts and regular rules, there's also a rule that goes for just the registered casts only, and that's going to be Rule 4K, and that reads that dogs' points will be minus in registered category for running, treeing, or molesting off game. Off game must be seen. In the event the off game is a squirrel seen in a tree and the tree is an obvious den tree, refer to Rule 5D. Birds are not considered off game. And it's mentioned 5D there twice, so I might as well point it out real quick. Rule 5D reads, points will be circled if a squirrel is seen on a den tree, must have visible hole large enough for a coon to enter into, or a tree has a nest or a place of refuge where a coon could be hidden. So that's a lot to unpack there. There's a lot of words and wording in there that we can discuss, and we're going to do that right here. First thing you'll see in all of that is running, treeing, or molesting. You think about off game, those are the 3 words that come to your mind. I think running and treeing are pretty straightforward terms, but people may wonder what molesting means or the definition of it. So if you look up the definition of molesting online, to pester or harass in an aggressive or persistent manner.
And that's where the question sometimes comes up, well, what if they're baying? Yep, that is it right there. Yep. Pestering that's it right there.
Yeah, that kind of covers everything but running and treeing. If you were to catch it on the ground or baying it up.
Baying at it.
If it's in a tile or anything like that, that's other than treeing, it covers everything else where they may be pestering or harassing the off game in a manner. So the second thing you'll see bolded in those rules is off game must be seen. This is kind of a new one.
That was a new one. It came with a rule change because in the old days that was not in there, that it had to be seen, and the only reason it wasn't, it had to do with running deer basically. Right. And in the old days we used to say, hey, if we know they're running a deer, say no without even seeing it. You would just scratch the dogs. They're running out of the country, on a fast game. But this came up in a rules proposal, and it passed that they wanted to see the off game before you do scratch them. So there you go.
Yeah, that was a proposal put in 2019, passed for 2020. So it's relatively new. Yeah. I would have just been. I don't remember the intent behind it, or I don't remember the discussions of it. But I'm sure.
Honestly, I kind of forgot about that having been in there. That it must be seen. But you brought it up and went back to the rule proposal and everything. So yeah.
So must be seen kind of spells that out for you.
Yeah.
And then it says also during hunt time, including timeouts prior to the end of the hunt. So what does that mean? That tells us that any dog treated in before timeout is called or before the conclusion of the hunt are still liable for their actions. Those dogs that are treated in you can still go score them and they can get plus points, so they can still accrue minus, and they can still be scratched for the hunt if they have off game in their treat.
Yep, and that also includes during a timeout. So technically it doesn't matter if they're running, treeing, or molesting, even during a timeout, whether they're called treat or not. That still applies to that situation. Back in the old days, that rule used to be they would be scratched for running, treeing, or molesting off game under the authority of the judge. So that meant even after a hunting time. So at some point they changed the rules to where just during hunt time, during regulation time, between the start of the hunt and the ending of the hunt, and including any timeout periods within that hunt. That's how it is now.
Right.
Instead of under the authority of the judge.
Yeah.
Under the authority of the judge, just for quick reference, that is that authority starts when the judge gets the scorecard at the club and it ends when he turns it in. that's when he has the authority of the cast.
That's right. Yeah. So the way that this tells us is that they're liable for their actions even during timeout periods. And that means that even if, let's say we call timeout because the dog's getting close to the road, and as soon as we call timeout, your dog comes running in with a possum in its mouth. It's a timeout period during the hunt. Your dog is still in a champion cast. Your dog's still going to get scratched from molesting off game in that case.
Yeah, and you mentioned a dog comes running in, and there's been cases, we get it sometimes where a dog, let's say a dog hasn't even barked at all and comes running in with a possum that it caught and killed. That dog is going to be scratched.
Right.
It doesn't have to be barking to be. That's still considered molesting. In this case, killed it or what have you, or not. It might not even, but it doesn't have to necessarily bark. Running, treeing, or molesting. It can molest something without technically barking,
Sure.
or anything like that. So just because a dog didn't bark doesn't mean the dog's going to get away with it.
Yeah, I thought it's interesting comparing that during the timeout period because of the way the rule reads. You could still get scratched if you see a dog molesting off game. But as soon as the hunt time runs out, the clock hits 0, only dogs that are treed in are then liable for anything that happens afterwards.
Right. Yeah.
Say hunt time ends and we're heading to a dog that was treed in before the conclusion of hunt time,
Mm-hmm.
and we're on the way to the tree, and there your dog is rolling around and the dead possum playing with it in its mouth. You're good to go.
Yeah.
Pick him up and let's head to the tree to score the dog that was treed in before hunt time. So that's a little bit of a difference there that you should probably know. Yeah. But it says it right there in the rule. It's pretty black and white.
Yeah. Now I mentioned, the dog doesn't technically have to be barking to be scratched for molesting, running, or treeing, or molesting off game. But here's another scenario where a dog might not be barking and might also not be scratched. Let's talk about that. Do you have that in here somewhere? I guess maybe not yet. Let's say, for instance, what I'm trying to get at is, let's say a dog comes into a tree or is there when you get there, and there's dogs treeing, have off game in the tree, but you have a dog at the tree that is not barking, not doing anything really, just kind of meandering around or what have you, not doing anything.
Yeah.
What are we doing with that dog?
I do have it in here. It's like I said, we were looking through some old advisor columns and actually found one that you had written back in July of 2015. And it's a scenario just like you're saying. So to paint the picture for people listening, so say you have a 4-dog night champion cast, A, B, and C are declared struck and treed, and you get in there. And you haven't heard D open. He hasn't been struck in. You haven't heard him opening. But when you get in there, all 4 dogs are at the tree. A, B, and C are treeing, but D is just there, maybe checking the tree, just hanging around the tree a little bit, just there. What happens to the dog? What do you do with dog D there? And in your column there, you say, obviously, dogs A, B, and C are scratched. They've been struck on the off game. They treed the off game. They're there treeing. But for dog D, let's go through the 3 things. Is the dog treeing? No. Or, sorry,
running.
Let's say molesting first. Yeah. Dog's not molesting the off game. Obviously, it's up in the tree. Yep. He's just milling around the tree. Has it been running? He has never been struck in. You can't say that he's been running or treeing. You can't verify that. Or he hasn't been running it. You haven't heard him or seen it, so you can't verify that activity. Yep. And third, is he treeing? If he's just there checking on a tree, maybe he jumps up and checks it. He's not barking or indicating treed. By any definition we have of treeing, that doesn't meet the standard of treeing. So in this case, this dog is not guilty of treeing, running, or molesting off game in this state. So no harm, no foul.
Yeah, and that just requires a little bit of common sense and being reasonable about it and judge the dog. Yeah. What's the dog doing?
Yep, that's right. Real quick, we should probably mention Rule 5B. You heard mention of 5B a few times. We've talked about it on this podcast a lot already. We talk about it with the advisor all the time. And Rule 5B tells us that no dog is to receive minus points for coming into the tree after the judge arrives, unless a coon is seen in the dog's tree and are awarded plus points. Right. Even if it's a possum. Say there's 3. It's a 4-dog cast. 3 of us are in there shining our tree, and there's a possum in our tree, and we're in there making noise. We want to try to find a coon in there, and all of a sudden, dog D comes trotting in after the fact. He's handled at the tree, but he came in after the judge arrives. That's when you apply 5B.
And we've used 5Bs forever, and that's an old policy, I guess, so to speak. But the whole idea behind 5B was to not scratch dogs or not penalize dogs for coming in, because the thing was that it's suggested that they are possibly being enticed to come in when you're making noise, squalling and shining and this and that. And not to penalize those dogs unless there is a raccoon sitting there. And that, like you said, includes off game. And that's the only thing that really saves a dog here 5B is going to take precedence over, even if that dog can come in and even bark in that case, technically, but yeah, it does 5B does protect it if it doesn't come in until after you've arrived.
Yeah.
Just handle the dog, and the only penalty it's going to get is if there's a coon there, and in that case, it's going to get its strike points minus, like the rule says.
Even with all it's covered, it's still one of probably the most missed questions on our Master of Hounds test. So
it is, and it's kind of the only rule that saves a dog from in this case maybe barking at off game or treeing off game, is if it comes in after you've arrived and goes to the tree. 5B is going to protect that dog, and it's the only rule and the only scenario that it's going to protect that dog.
Absolutely, you're right.
Which, hey, you could argue that, but that's the way the rule is, and that's what the intent of that rule was, to not penalize dogs for that unless there's a coon there, and they should have been there to begin with.
Another slight change. Obviously, this rule's been probably one that's been in the rule book for a long time, but it's been tweaked and adjusted over the years. One adjustment that I found that happened in the 2017 rule book, that's still in there now, is the inclusion of a couple lines there at the end that you probably heard. And one talks about the squirrel being seen in an obvious den tree, or in a tree with a big nest, or another place of refuge where a coon could be hidden. And then also about birds not being considered off game. Both of those were added to this rules, into the wordage of these rules back in 2017. And it was interesting to kind of read some of your articles from that time and talking about how to implement a rules. It's something for a rule to get passed, but then trying to implement it in the rule book, because it always affects other things in the rule book when you're doing that, and you have to kind of spell it out and make sure it doesn't do that. But one of the things that you were trying to figure out, it looked like, and what you wrote about was coming into a tree and you see a squirrel in there, and there's a hole, determining whether the hole in the tree would be big enough to house a coon, or if a coon could fit in it, and deciding whether that would be a judgment call by the judge on that cast, or if that would be a majority vote like you do at some trees. And in the rules and what you've wrote in the past, it's actually the judge would make a call on whether the hole's big enough to house a coon. And if the people in the cast don't agree with that, obviously they can question it and have a cast vote at that point. A majority would overrule the judge, but the judge makes the decision on that.
It is. And, really, if you think about it in the rules, there's very few things that actually automatically go to a cast vote, and that is the scoring of a tree, whether it's going to be plus, circle, or minus,
Yeah.
That's one of the few things that goes directly to automatically goes to a cast vote. But most all other situations, the judge makes the ruling, and then if somebody doesn't agree, you ask for a vote, and then it takes a majority vote to overturn the judge's decision. And deciding whether the hole is big enough to house a coon or not, because the thing here we've got a squirrel in the tree, the situation we're talking about. So you'll see a lot of squirrel dens where the holes are obviously a lot smaller, So that's going to be the decision of the judge to make, And if you don't agree, hey, vote on it. Ask for a vote, and if it takes a majority to overturn the judge's decision.
Yeah. While we're talking about that, there's a similar situation that we talked about upstairs that's kind of misinterpreted by people sometimes. I think a lot of times people wonder about, what do you do on 2-2 votes? 2 thinks it's circle, 2 thinks it's plus, this and that. What if you're having trouble distinguishing whether it's a coon or possum in the tree? Most people who hunt can tell the difference, but sometimes there's a situation where maybe the tree's a little woolly and you can't really tell. But that's not a situation where you vote, right?
Not unless there's a question on it. Here again, the judge is going to make that decision. He's going to decide whether it's a raccoon or off game or something else. If that's the case, and then if you don't agree with somebody doesn't, then that's when the vote ensues. And here again, it's going to take a majority vote to overturn the judge's decision.
Yeah,
but it doesn't just automatically go to a cast vote saying, hey, I think it's a coon, right?
Yeah.
That's the judge makes that decision.
Yeah, so 2 pretty similar scenarios.
Yeah, if there's
there
no question there, you just rock on. There's no question. Yeah. The only time you have to vote then, whether it's that, is if there's a question on his ruling.
Yeah, so don't forget that judge makes a call on those 2 rulings there. So kind of couple those 2 together, they kind of go hand in hand with one another.
Yeah.
Birds.
It's kind of the same thing. There's a lot of things like that, and I know they get done wrong a lot of times. Are we scoring this as 2 trees or 1 trees or whatever? How are you voting? That's not the way it happened. The judge, you make the call. You make the call. Then if I don't agree with it, I'll ask for a vote. That's how it should work, and by rule, the way it's supposed to work.
And let's talk about birds a little bit. Birds, birds are not considered off game according to the rules. We read it in there at the end of those rules. And when you see the mention of birds, past advisor columns would tell us that this refers to birds in the wild. We're not talking about chickens or other farm birds.
Hey, I'm glad you bring that up because we would consider that a difference. Yeah. One you're going to get scratched for and the other one not. One is considered livestock, which you're going to get scratched for any type of livestock, whereas birds is not considered livestock as far as like, crows and things like that, even turkeys and hey, that's a debatable thing, birds, and it always has been, and it's happened, I guess, when you go into a tree and there's a dog tree and there's a turkey in the tree or what have you. I haven't seen it all that many times, but you have, if you hunt long enough, you'll see some things like that. But yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned chickens and things like that, birds, like livestock birds like that. It's a different rule that applies there.
Yeah, and you're talking about Rule 5G, and 5G tells us that dogs will be scratched for running or molesting livestock. And the big thing about that rule, like you just said, you're in champions and registered cast, there's a difference between what happens for you in off game.
Yeah.
In livestock, no matter whether you're in a registered or a champion cast, you're scratched.
Boom. You got it. That's exactly right.
Key difference there.
Yeah. Registered are going to get scratched for molesting livestock as well.
Yeah. And I think most of us can be reasonable when we're in the woods and think about, we know what livestock is. Chickens compared to wild birds, you said crows, maybe a hawk sitting up or an owl or something. There's a big difference there.
Difference between a wild hog and a domestic hog.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. The reason I added this in here,
I found pig versus a wild hog is the note you made here.
I found an old advisor column from December of 1993, an old Todd Kellum article, and the question was, they had a wild hog bait up in the middle of the woods. Obviously, it's a wild hog, but the person says, we got a pig out here bait up. This is a livestock animal. He's thinking, okay. And there's a big difference between a domesticated pig and one running around in the woods, and know the difference. Just be reasonable and take your minus or your scratch where you have it coming. Mm-hmm. I figured that we might end this segment about off game now that we've gone through the rules, talking about some different strange scenarios that you may see sometimes.
We've got some notes here that you made. Here you mentioned this next note you've got here about dogs catching a possum on the ground, so I kind of jumped ahead of it here, but there you've got it right there. So you were going to, I apologize for that. No. You had it noted in here. So yeah, you're talking about a dog catches a possum on the ground right out of the truck, but never lets out a bark or is not struck in or anything like that. But yeah, that dog's still guilty of running, treeing, or molesting.
Yeah, so you mentioned what would happen in a champion cast. That dog would be scratched. Mm-hmm. But in a registered cast, this dog's never opened its mouth. It's never been struck in.
True. And that can be kind of confusing sometimes. Absolutely. But there is a difference in a registered cast. Now, it's only a difference. Now, you can have some registered dogs in certain type of events, like you mentioned in the onset, where you have, if they all compete or are all combined, registered champs and grands are all in the same category, like in a slam or the World Championship or what have you, different events like that. In that case, championship rules do apply even to those registered dogs. Yeah. That might be in the cast.
Yeah, but in this case, in a registered cast, you cut your dogs loose and your dog catches a possum, never been struck in, never allowed to bark, and it carries it into you. What are you going to do?
Yeah, then our beaglers are like, what? Our beagles run off game. They're scratched even in a registered. They don't have that difference between the two. They have the same off-game rules.
Got to be harder on those guys and gals. But in that case, the dogs never. You typically would minus the dog's strike points, but without it being struck in, lucky break for you. Nothing happens to you in that scenario. So.
Yeah, you're talking about a situation where a dog did not bark, and a registered cast dog didn't bark, catches a possum, brings it into you, and never made a bark or anything. Yeah, normally you're right. It would be minus strike points, but has no strike points to minus, so it can't be struck in if it didn't bark.
Yep, that's right. And I actually got that one from your March 2016 advisor column.
Oh, okay.
So there you go. You guys can go back and read that if you have any questions about that. Yeah. Here's the July 2015 advisor column. We mentioned that one a little bit ago. Here's another one here. Dogs treeing on a tree with nothing in it. Let's say maybe you're barking on a big oak tree, but it has a little sapling that runs right into it, and there's a possum 12 foot off the ground over the dog's head, but it's in a different tree. What are you going to do in that one? A lot of times when I talk to people about rules, they're quick to want to plus their dog if there's a coon a tree over where there could possibly be some crossovers. But when it's off game and that could cross over in this instance, not so quick to want to pin that on the dog. But same instance, we know we can probably make the assumption looking at this that the trees are touching, the dog is is going to probably be treeing that off game. That's what he's doing there. And sometimes you just have to take your lumps where you get them.
Yeah,
so and pretty straightforward.
Yeah, forget about making the excuses, because at the end of it all, you're the one that's looking silly making those excuses, and that's about sums it up, really.
Not much more to say about that.
Yeah, there isn't really. Like you said, take your lumps. It happens. They're dogs. They do stuff like that, and happens.
That's right. Next one, something that is pretty rare to happen, but I've actually seen that happen a few times. I'm sure you have as well. Coon and off game in the same tree. Most typically, probably a possum sitting about 15 foot off the ground, and there's a coon up in the second fork.
I've seen it several times in my time, and one time I'll tell a quick little story. There was the Nestle boys that placed what did they place, second or third in the world hunt this year?
Second place.
Yeah, they used to have a dog named Indiana Buck, and he was one of the locals. He was a good hound, and kind of one of those that he beat me more than I beat him. Old Buck was pretty tough, but one night I kind of had an upper hand on. He made a couple of quick barks and falls treed, and there's a possum in the one of the lower branches or whatever. And we shined the tree. His dad, old Dave, was handling the dog or whatever, and I'll be doggone if he didn't have a coon up in the top of that tree. And I'm just like, man, I just can't beat this dog.
That's funny.
And you know what? I don't know. Maybe he treated. I don't know. But yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's happened at the World Finals too.
Yeah,
it's happened there.
Well, down in I'm from Southeast Tennessee, obviously, and there's areas where we put out feeders. Certain times of the year, there's not a lot of crops. There's things for them to eat, and you have to do things to keep them close by.
Yeah.
Especially if you're hunting a young dog, maybe you want to get them on some good tracks. And when you have a feeder or something out, it's not uncommon to have two sitting there close by. In that case, you got a young dog, maybe you don't whoop or pet. You just kind of go and send them on their way. And but if it happens in a hunt, you plus that dog up, you give it the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, and that's kind of the same idea with a squirrel. If you see a squirrel on the idea is that they ran the coon in the den, and the coon ran the squirrel out of the den. And that does legitimately happen. Absolutely does.
I've seen that one. I've seen that as well.
Sure.
So we're just trying to find the best dog on that night, and these are some things that can happen, and you can't really tell what the dog was smelling or what it was barking at, but oftentimes you give the dog the benefit of the doubt. So sometimes it's a lucky break, sometimes it's not.
Yeah,
that's the breaks. But you also told a little funny story about your pertaining to a rule earlier about carrying in a possum never allowed to bark or anything with your brother on a cast earlier. That's pretty. I was wondering if you were going to tell that one earlier, but
no, he made it kind of a point of telling me, you got lucky or whatever. The dog catches a possum or whatever comes in, and he was a night champion or whatever at that time, and he just got lucky, never barked. I said, well, doesn't matter. He didn't need to bark. And he copped a little attitude with me. He didn't like my answer to it. But hey, those things happen, and he really thought that the dog shouldn't have been minused or whatever, and got away with one because he didn't bark. But I kind of put a little damper in that idea. But again, it goes back to what we talked about. It was a difference in whether he was a champion or a registered dog.
Absolutely.
Registered dog, it would have been just fine.
Absolutely. I got kind of one more good scenario here for you that has to do with off game, and I'm sure there's a lot more, but we've kind of taken up a lot of time here talking about it. So if you guys have any more good questions, you can always email them to us, and we can touch on them here or in the advisor column or what have you. But the last one here, I'll read a scenario here. This was up in the December 1997 advisor column. So
not me. I didn't write that one.
I dug way back for this one.
Yeah.
But it says here, it said 10 minutes, but I've, of course, changed it to meet modern rules. 8 minutes has expired on a tree, and the decision has been made to circle it. You walk away and look back, and you see a possum tucked where no one saw it during shine time. How do you score this tree for both registered and champion division cast? And as actually Todd Killam that wrote this, and like I said, we had a question come in that was similar to this, and rather than giving my answer to somebody without first talking to you or scouring through the advisors, I want to know what a past precedent is or what precedent has been set in the past for these questions.
This is kind of where we found one of them as far as precedents goes. Yeah. Setting precedents.
This was about the closest we could find to the scenario that the guy sent in. And in Todd's answer, he said, for a registered cast, there's nothing you can do. Shine time's over on that tree. If it was a coon at that point, you couldn't plus
Right.
it, and now since it's a off game, or you can't minus it.
Yep.
So nothing you can do about it at this point. Shine time's over. He says, however, for a champion cast, those dogs were still treeing off game, and therefore they were treeing, running, or molesting off game, and therefore they're scratched from the hunt. That gave us our answer right there.
Mm-hmm.
To kind of compare that to the question that came in to
Well, that
us,
would have been a letdown if you would have had a chance. That would have been you're walking away from him thinking, okay, everything's cool. All of a sudden, the rest of your night changes up a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like there's been a few situations where people call in like maybe one of those good situations to just maybe keep your mouth closed and go cut your dog loose. Don't point it out to nobody. Just keep on walking.
Yeah. Hey, but that's something that happens a lot, or at least I used to do it a lot. Can't get a raccoon to look or whatever when you're close by. Use your last minute or so, grab your dog and walk away and look back, and you'd be surprised how many times you might see eyeballs looking at you after you walk away like that.
Oh, absolutely. I've done it many times, especially pleasure hunting by yourself.
Yep.
Heck, I won't even if it's pretty leafy out still, I'll just take him off, go cut him loose, and then turn around and search it by myself for a little bit, and I'll usually find a coon.
So I don't know if this was a hypothetical or not, because I don't know. Usually opossums are pretty low, and they're not that hard to find. But hey, I can tell you, I've seen trees already where I've shined the whole time, and I'll just be honest with folks. There was one that I'm referring to as a big old dentry, big hole, and it was half the tree was bare. It was in the fall of the year. And I am just fixated on the hole and trying to squall a raccoon out of this hole or getting to him to look. And after the shine time's over, a spectator comes over and he says, "Right here's your coon." And he's just laying on top of this, one of the first limbs, and just like, how did you miss that, dummy?
Yeah.
So it can happen, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. The question that actually came in, and it's similar. It's not the exact same situation, but it's kind of similar from this and what we derived our answer from. The question that came in asked, it's a 3-dog cast, and 2 dogs are declared treed. You get in there, they have off game possum treed. You scratch those 2 dogs from the hunt. There's one still at large. You're sitting there. After a while later, that 3rd dog makes its way around, ends up falling treed. You get in there, and it's on the same tree with the same possum. How do you score it? Is it the previously scored treat where you delete the points and go on, or is that dog treeing and molesting off game?
Same thing we just talked about, the differences in registered or champions. That's going to be your difference.
Yep. In a registered cast, what would happen to the dog is the dog would be minus for treeing off game, but that tree's already been scored, so you can't minus it again. In champion cast, like it tells us before, even though that tree's already been scored, you realize the dog is treeing, running, or molesting off game. That's the case here, so that dog is also scratched from the hunt.
Does not save a champion dog in that case. That's the difference between the two. Previously scored does not save it. The only thing that saves a champion from it is what we talked about earlier, coming in after the judge has arrived. Now, that is while you're still at the tree, not after you have left it.
Mm-hmm. So there you go.
Hey, it's interesting. Those things are, and you're going to get guys that debate that, want to debate it, don't agree with it, and that's fine, but that's the precedence that has been set with these rules. And I think it's good that we have that opportunity to go back and read those articles and stick with that. There's probably some things that we have changed, but very, very few. None of these situations like this, we've stuck with it. Hey, who am I going to argue with our forefathers, old, Todd Kellum and Fielder and those that wrote the advisor columns before us, so yeah.
Yeah, it's I think it's important to be transparent, and I was pretty honest with the guy. This one stumped me a little bit. I wanted to find out an answer for it, and it's not one you see every day, but we now know the correct interpretation, and I won't forget it now after doing all that research. It's one that'll stick with you, and hopefully it sticks with you guys too that are listening. It's some good questions came in, and there's a lot of good topics that we covered today that had to do with off games. So hopefully you guys took something from it.
Yeah.
Hope to do more rule stuff in the future. So if you guys ever have any rule topics you want us to cover, hopefully not dogs treeing but not declared treed or anything like that we've covered 5 times. But if you guys have any new questions like this, or maybe some that haven't been addressed in a while, there's probably some good ones that haven't been addressed in the past 4 or 5 years that would bring them back to the front.
Send those questions to us. We like to talk rules. I've always liked to talk about rules, and I'd like to talk about them on here as well.
Yeah. So
it's almost easier to talk about it than it is to write about it.
Oh, absolutely. Now I'm gonna take this actually and make probably a column about off game for my advisor column, and I guarantee it'll take me twice as long to do that than it did to sit here and talk about it. But still, I won't cover it as well as we did. But that's just the one of the perks of having the podcast and being able to give you guys our interpretation and not just give it to you in writing, but actually explain to you and have a conversation about what the interpretations mean. Thank you for listening to the UKC Hunting Ops Podcast. Be sure to give us a follow so you don't miss any of our new episodes or content.